love and give me shelter. Simple life is all we want to live. Give me food, give me clothes, give me love and give me shelter. Yeah.
So welcome everyone to the We Too Are Liberians movement platform, your distinct and dynamic platform that speaks to and for the masses. We are not in the business of manufacturing players, pimps, and hustlers. Rather, we are in the business of changing and revolutionizing the thought process of our people. Foreign fire heating up the Middle East, domestic horror unfolding in Liberia. What happens when fear, mistrust, and failed diplomacy collide? Stay with me. Tonight, we are asking if we've lost our humanity. Good evening once more, and welcome to the We Too Are Liberians movement podcast. Tonight, conversation is heavy but necessary. Foreign fire, domestic horror. Are we losing our humanity? We'll dive into two events that may seem worlds apart, but they are share commonality, or we also share a common threat: human suffering born from fear, from broken trust, and from systems that fail us. Tonight's show is broken down into segments. First segment is actually the Middle East tumultuous turning point, and we do have our second segment here, Liberia, a heartbroken homecoming. And our third segment, we have fear, mistrust, and the human cost. Our fourth segment, we have post-war mental health, hidden but real. And then our fifth segment for tonight's show, what the Liberian diaspora should demand. Finally, we have our closing segment, which is a call to action. So bear with me tonight. If you have your phone, please begin to share the live with as many people as possible. Again, this is the We Too Are Liberians movement podcast. I'm your host, Ayiti Williams. Ayiti Williams is here to dissect or unpack a very, very thought-provoking topic for the night. Again, go to your device. That could be your cell phone, and right on Facebook. Please begin to share the live here. I'm trying to get to my Facebook page here, and then go right here and share this podcast. So our podcast has actually been shared not only on Facebook, but also we're streaming on YouTube. And so please share this live here if you can. I'm sorry. I think there's a feedback here. So I'll go right ahead and start sharing the show on Facebook. Yes, let me share it here. And so do me a favor tonight. Please begin to share the show. All right, let's get right into our show tonight. Let's look at our first segment. Please hold tight as we dive a little bit deep into. So our first segment, like we said, the Middle East, the tumultuous turning point. You've likely heard the headlines: Israel's military offensive against Iran's nuclear site, part of what they are calling Operation Rising Line. Airstrikes, missiles, exchanges, rises tension, not mere geopolitics, but lives and fears on the front lines have been destroyed. We are told it's about preemptive defense, national security, but let's ask why why is diplomacy actually failing? That's the question that we have tonight. Were there earlier opportunities for negotiation, or was fear too powerful? When words leader actually rather than engage, we lose the very channel that keep us from spiraling into conflict. When trust evaporates, missiles fill the void. So let's transition to our second segment here, a heartbroken homecoming. Meanwhile, halfway across the globe, another tragedy with a startling personal impact. A Liberian woman living in Canada returned home to build a dream. a house, a future. Days after arriving, she was murdered, reportedly by someone very close, a life snuff out of, whatever you may call it, in a country she sought to invest in, a home she hoped to build with love and vision. This isn't just a crime, it's a failure of protection, of community bonds. I would like to say it that way. It raises urgent questions. How safe are diaspora Liberians actually when they come home to Liberia? This is a question that we all need to ask, because I remember far back, maybe in the mid 90s, when I was in Liberia, a father actually returned to Liberia. Father and mother returned to Liberia and were killed by their own sons. I mean, because of what they took to Liberia. The what was seen as riches, because the dad actually had a grip that he took to Liberia, the sons actually saw that as riches, or the dad was actually rich. And actually to kill him, only to find out that there was nothing in that particular grip. So how, again, the question here is, how safe are diaspora Liberians actually when they actually return or come home to Liberia? Can we hold system accountable before tragedy strike? That can be a question that we all can be left to answer all by ourselves when we are in our quiet and private places. So now the fear that we have, mistrust, and the human cost. At the heart of both stories, fear of the nuclear arm. Now going back to Iran, fear of vulnerability on one's own soil, fear that the people, the very people we trust, can betray us. And that's the fear that we're talking about, the fear that actually breeds mistrust. And mistrust drive harsh policies, violent actions, silence in the face of danger. Our response is a question, right? Building walls, heightening security, arming ourselves, often at the expense of dialogue, empathy, and justice. Now, let's look at segment 4 that talks about post-war mental health, hidden but real. When war rages or tragedy strikes close to home, the aftermath isn't just physical, it's mental. Civilian in conflict zones face PTSD, and that's what that's called. I think a lot of our mental health professional will have the actual definition to what this is all about. And from my own experience working around the human services years back, I believe it's post-traumatic stress disorder, anxiety, insomnia. Communities in Liberia mourn silently, afraid to speak up or seek help. We forget that these emotional wounds don't heal overnight. Lives are reshaped, fractured, and without proper mental health support, the cycle of trauma continues unbroken. So now, segment 5, I want to get to real quick. What the Liberian diaspora should demand? This question is what I want us to kind of focus on here. So again, what we should be demanding as diaspora, and those of us who find ourselves in the diaspora. So what now is the main question that we need to be asking? For those in the Liberian diaspora looking to invest, build, and return, here's what we should be actually demanding. I think it was several days ago, the great brother, Dwalo, actually, who has a heart to see Liberia, rise from its economic pit. Actually, I believe he posted a commentary on Facebook, and I had a very opportunity to go ahead and read what that commentary was about, talking about improving Liberia's infrastructure, and the way that he wants to approach this is actually to empower Liberians financially by building in the streets. And we know the program that he just started with, that's the Liberian Diaspora Corporation. But how many of us actually paying attention to this? But that's besides the point. So now the question is, what's now is the way forward. For those in the Liberian diaspora looking to invest, build, or to return here, it's the question that we want. What should we be demanding? That's a question for all of us. I think some of the things that we should be strong legal protection, especially regarding domestic rights, right? Inheritance, transparent community partnership. So you know who's on the ground and who has your back. Those are things that we need to actually be advocating for, or be trying to put first. Government liaison offices. That's actually respond who safeguards your investment and your safety. Those are things that we take for granted. I was in the barbershop when I returned from Liberia last September, and I had a very privilege of interacting with some young men and women. Actually, my focus was on the young men who I made a video with, and they began to explain to me how the community has actually despised them. And so I went ahead, we interacted, I made the video, and I kind of reached out to some of our entrepreneurs in the community to see how well they could kind of reach out and help these guys. But my effort was to no avail. But yes, the point that I'm trying to make. So civil society allies, NGOs, legal advocates, watchdogs, linked to your plans and ready to act. Because if you are building a home in Liberia or a future in Liberia, you deserve one that's safe, accountable, and resilient. But a lot of us, we take our future investments. And to take a step further, even there were some Americans that I talked to, and just based on the name, we too are Liberians, and we're trying to encourage them to go back to Liberia because they are also part of the diaspora. The fact that they are Black, the Africans, and especially African Americans who forefathers were slaves. And the fact that Liberia was actually established or founded by, free slaves and actually gained our independence through the instrumentalities of ex-slaves who saw themselves as independent and now wanted to establish an independent state and independent country, went ahead and established Liberia. So if we also, who have been privileged to travel overseas, and maybe not only Liberia, but for example, the lady who was in Canada who will return to Liberia after she had invested. And today I did a short, and on my short talked about some of the facts that we know are established facts, where we come to this country knowing, and I know a lot of us, what we do here, we put up a show, making it seem like, we have it all, and then we go back, we masquerade after we have worked 2, 3, 4, 5 jobs. Some of us, yes, we've had privilege and opportunity to advance ourselves. So we have careers, and even at that, even if you were to ascend to a place where now you're a doctor, or maybe you're a lawyer, or an engineer, a computer scientist, sociologist, psychologist, anthropologist, economist, accountant, finance major, and all that kind of stuff. You still work. You still have a job where you're making some kind of wage, honest wage, and the taxes. And the real truth here is that sometimes the higher you make or the more money you make, we know what it is, the taxes that, if you were to earn maybe $5,000, $6,000, $7,000, or maybe even $10,000 a month, think about it. If you were a third of what you make goes to the government. So, but the hours that you have to put in, especially for those of us who have been privileged to work in corporate entities or in high places, the pressure that you carry. So if you were to, and then it's the very ordinary. Let's bring it down to ordinary person who's working their regular jobs. Maybe we'll have to work 2, 3 jobs. Some people are doing living and all that kind of stuff. So we work, you earn honest money, and you send that money back home. I've had personal experiences where I bought properties, I've invested, and all of my investments were to no avail. And sometimes you get frustrated. But in this case, where this lady will invest all that she had, with the hope that she would return one day. And so she returned now to Liberia. But, a couple of days after, the story goes to say that whoever the money was being sent to, she was in relationship with that person. And so there was a little, misunderstanding where, law enforcement officers were called to intervene. So she was asked to leave the premises, to go for a little bit, maybe stay, and then later on she would come. So after the day, she returned. And the story is told that whoever was entrusted to build a house. When they had built a house, big house, is considered to be a mansion by Liberia standard, and she's happy and all that stuff. But once this confusion broke out, she was asked to leave after law enforcement intervened, and she comes back. The story further goes on to say that the body there's a body found wrapped up in mattress, and it's burned. Body was mutilated even before cut, whatever, and burned. And then it's so think about there's a number of things here that we want to bring into context. So what really transpired, that would lead to her demise in such manner? And so I want to attribute this to maybe there was something that actually triggered the whole incident that would degenerate into whatever it degenerated to, that will allow, that person to murder her and to have her body be discarded or be disposed and left outside, And it was on exhibit. People went there and so on, things like that. But the real truth is, how are we going to try to make these investments if, in fact, the people who we call out are not there to protect us? And because this situation is not really unique, it's not only unique to this lady, but this is something that we see or we have seen happening from time to time. And the real truth is, hopefully, the perpetrator or whoever, or the murderer is apprehended, and maybe, you go through due process or whatever. And then if he's found guilty, we'll go to prison. But how many of these cases where you see people would be arrested and maybe found guilty, would do prison time, and example would be set that others would see? And if this was to be repeated, or there were plans to repeat this, and those individuals will be of the mindset that, because of what happened to the individual or that other individual, so I'm not going to be. So that we've not established any bodies, like I said, going back to some of the stringent rules that I think we can put in place, strong legal protection for those of us in the diaspora. Like I said, especially regarding domestic rights and inheritance. So yes, I send my money over to Liberia. My house is being built, or it's built, it's finished, I've returned. I just had a story, actually being narrated to me by a friend of mine about his uncle who had been called by one of his family members that on their property, they discover a diamond, and this very large diamond. And so he got this call, but his wife is actually one of those females who they do live in. So it means that she's usually away. So he explains to his wife that this diamond has been found on the property. So he was going to go to Liberia, and then whatever they had to do, maybe was to process the diamond and maybe sell it, and for the proceed. So he was warned by his wife, don't go to Liberia, because if you do go to Liberia, I don't know what's going to happen. And she was right, because he was on the plane, he leaves, goes to Liberia, and whatever the case was, this man was present. Quickly, he had to be put on the plane, was brought back to the States. Brought back to the States. Later on, it was said that he was pronounced dead. And this man was, the body, they had to customize a casket or coffin that they put him in because his body was so bad. The inside of the body was so bad, such to the point that they had to customize his casket. But think about the evil that's, that continue to 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 evade our society, that continue to, envelope our society, Liberia, how Liberia has become so evil. This is so pervasive and invasive, and this is something, it's more like a tradition, it's a culture. And so when we're doing these things, especially for those of us on this end, not necessarily America, but let's just take it to, the point where we're talking about the lady in Canada. It could be in Europe, could be in France, whatever. We have to be, we need a transparent community partnership. So we know who we're dealing with on the ground. Because a lot of us sometimes, even with relationships, people will meet people online. And then, I just got, it was a story that was told several days ago. I think on Sunday, a relative friend of mine was visiting, and he began to explain how his brother met this, I'm not even going to call her name, but met this girl online. And now all of the investments been placing her in her name. And a lot of times, and these things don't end in a, in a favorable manner. Normally it ends up where, somebody getting sick, somebody dying, and things like that, bad health condition, people not being able to retain the memory, to remember stuff, and then the other party, will reap the dividend or reap the benefit. So now maybe for those of us in the diaspora, may need to also establish some kind of government liaison offices that we can, use so as to protect us. That will be able to respond to those situations and be proactive, maybe even before these things happen. They can come to our aid. So these government liaison offices that actually respond, who safeguard your investment or your safety? Because you don't want to work all your life and take all your investment and take it to a country, your birth country, only to be ripped off. And a lot of times people will respect the foreigners, they respect other people, but our own kinds are the ones that are killing us. So we also need, again, like I said, civil society allies who will be there, like NGOs who can establish the NGO, legal advocates to be there to protect us. And this is what we're talking about. This country established 1820, I was founded 1820, 1847, the rule of law. So there's nothing there to protect us. We don't have civil society allies that would say, we'll be there to support us. And so if we can do that, so we have our investment, instead of actually giving it to the individual, we can use these institutions that will be there to safeguard, to protect us, to advocate for us, and that we can link our plan to our plans so that they can act on our behalf. Because if we are not doing these things, we're not using these institutions, that we will try to establish, so then how can we build a better future? How can we build our homes in life? How can we even encourage foreign investors to come and build this country so that we can make it a better place? We deserve one of these. We need accountability. So without that, we'll continue to find ourselves in deeper problems. And this is something that we need to avoid. But how can this be avoided? So now, in closing, I want to bring your attention to a call to action. Yes, the through line. Now let's go back to from Tehran to Monrovia. Humanity is at risk when diplomacy fails, when fear becomes policy, when individual grief is ignored. Tonight, I challenge you, don't just listen, do something, support diplomatic solutions, advocate for mental health resources, demand justice and protection for diaspora families. Write, speak up, invest in vigilance. And this is something that's very important. Let's not just lose our humanity. Let's fight for connection, for trust, for compassion. One policy, one voice, one community at home. And I think if we do this, we'll be on our way to a better Liberia. So tonight, again, you're watching the We to Our Liberians Movement podcast. I'm your host, Ayiti Williams. This is the We to Our Liberians Movement podcast. I want you to stay socially conscious, stay so morally awake, and stay empowered. Again, next time, I hope to see you on our podcast here. We air every Wednesday. Unfortunately, we were not able to have this live conducted at 8 p.m. because of our busy schedule. We went ahead and we made a lot of lives. This week we did one on Sunday, and then I went ahead today. I did one just before our actual show. But as I conclude the show, I want to bring to your attention that this Sunday I will be speaking at a church's event, and this event is going to be at. Let me get that squared out here before I close the show, because it's also going to be a very, very interesting service where this is something I haven't done, but I was called to do so. It's going to be at Christ the King Prayer Chapel. I was cordially invited to serve as the guest speaker. I'm not a pastor, but this is their Father's Day Sunday celebration. It starts at 2 p.m., but for the benefit of us Liberians who we have a tradition of being late, service at 1:30 p.m. we will gather and they will start praying and things like that. So we encourage you to come and be part of this service. It starts at actually 2 p.m. by 1 p.m. So come 1:30 p.m. We urge you to try to be there so we can start mobilizing, just to get ourselves together so that by 2 p.m. we can get service going. And if the service is going to last for an hour, and I believe strongly that after the service, there's going to be refreshment. But the theme of the service this Sunday is walking in wisdom, biblical fathers and their legacy. I know, usually we talk about the Bible. Usually we go back to Bible history and things like that. But, there's a great theologian by the name of Charles Spurgeon who once said that every effective teacher, a preacher, must be able to teach from the vantage point of having a Bible in one hand. I believe it was Dr. C. George Gregory who once said that when we parallel the Word of God, like I said before, that every effective preacher and teacher must be able to teach and preach from the vantage point of having the Bible in one hand, having the newspaper in another, that when we parallel the Word of God, we must be able to take the Word of God from the wasness of then and bring it into the isness of now. So we are going to be actually looking at biblical text, but at the same time, we want to take biblical text and then bring it into secular, context, because we have a lot of fathers, and who are not assuming that responsibility. So when we look at fathers, we don't just want to look at Father's Day from the standpoint where we go there and we're being celebrated. Let's see Father's Day from the standpoint where we have to look at the role of a father. Biblical context, talk about Abraham, who was the father of many nations. Talk about Joseph, who was the stepfather of Jesus. He was there to protect, safeguard Jesus, and also to protect Mary. He was a role model. This man was a carpenter, but he played that role. He was obedient. He fathers he followed God's instruction to ensure that Jesus was born, and that Jesus, did what he was called to do during his time on planet Earth. And not only that, we're also going to be looking at David, with David, who was king, who would kill Uriah and would sleep with Bathsheba. And not only would he sleep with Bathsheba, would also have a kid by Bathsheba. And would struggle. He had some family dynamics, family problems. But yet and still, he was a man who was after God's heart, because after he erred and strayed, what did he do when he was convicted? After he was caught by the prophet Nathan, who would say that, David, you are the man. David went and would begin to pray, begin to ask God for forgiveness. So we want to actually use those fathers. We're talking about Abraham, we'll be talking about Joseph, and then we'll actually climax with David. Hopefully we'll use another father, but yes. And then we'll bring it into context, because when we talk about legacy is actually what are you going to leave behind? You know what I mean? Because a lot of us, all we think about is what we can do now. But the true measure of a man is not what we do now. Yes, what we do now is important, but what are we going to leave behind when we are gone? That's very important. So we'll be talking about the role of a father, biological father, the role of stepfather, our roles, our responsibility, what's expected of us. We've not just come here when they talk about fathers, not just the proliferation of children. It's not just buying your child sneakers or maybe Xbox or maybe paying that child support. But your responsibility is way beyond that. It's to educate, it's to protect, it's to cultivate, it's to direct, it's to guide, to protect, all that stuff. Sorry if I sound redundant. And the question now is, if Jesus can say, "Our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name." The question, have you ever been called, "Hallowed be thy name"? What role are you playing as a father? And so we'll also be giving the historical context of Father's Day. How did it start? We went ahead, we did a monologue, and we talk about Father's Day. Actually, is dated back to 1908, after a mining collapse in Fairmont, Virginia. After that event, there was a massive celebration honoring fathers. And after that continued until 1972, when President Richard Nixon of the great United States of America, would sign a proclamation making that, I believe the third Sunday or so in June, or the second, I stand to be corrected, Father's Day. And so we have to go back. It's not just a day that we buy ties, or we buy maybe some kind of brochure, or maybe pen, whatever and then we honor a father. But are you actually playing the role of a father? Are you there for your children? Are you being an example, especially from a Pan-African or African roots, a tradition, a culture? Those are the things that we want to look at. So it's not just a day that we go and we talk about, yes, Abraham was the father of many nations, but what are you now? What role and responsibility are you playing? Are you being an example? Today as I was talking to the man of God, we talked about Malcolm X, who was Malcolm Little. His father was a Baptist preacher. And his father was killed. The body was left on the train track. Malcolm X would spiral into gang violence and would end up in prison. What happened to all of the pastors, those Baptist preachers? Why didn't they go there to rescue this young man? But Malcolm X will be introduced to the nation, the Islamic nation, And that's why, not to divert, but can you imagine the church? We have 20% men and 80% women. In the mosque, we have 80% men and 20% women. Where we men are supposed to be, to empower, to educate, to cultivate our young men, to protect them, to point them in the direction that they'll see, so that they can be an example, not only for our men, even for our girls, so that they can start to make the right decision, so that they can date good men, upright men, men who actually are responsible, who are not just about physicality, but who are about leaving legacy, who are about, continuing, fostering or furthering the work of the sovereign one, who are here to teach, to leave behind. Because the true, and that's why we always say the true man, it's not the acquisition of wealth, but what we're going to leave behind. You know what I mean? I think several weeks ago I had a live and I was talking about I talked about Les Brown, who I think he made an analogy. He said, imagine yourself on your deathbed, and on your deathbed are your gifts and talent that come to you. Same thing, Father. You actually came with gift, came with talent. True. Because it was your sperm that met that egg to produce that child. So it was programmed. But when that child comes, it's your responsibility to nurture that child, to be an example, to provide for that child. I went back, I was talking to the man of God. Our children are supposed to exceed us. Even before Jesus performed signs and wonders, before he turned water into wine, God, before he had an encounter with Satan, God said to him, this is my son that I'm pleased with. How many of us, Father, can say to our children, we are pleased? I use myself as an example. Everything that I've become, that I've achieved, is as a consequence or result of the man who I call my father, because he was there for me. I may not have agreed with everything that he did, but he supported me. He made sure I have one of the best, the quality education. The resources needed to thrive in school. And I give an example. I failed the 5th grade. And when I failed, I ran away. Dad came, took me and put him on his lap and said to me, son, you're going to go back to that school and you will make it. I didn't fail because I was dull, but because I was between two homes and I had some deficiencies, wasn't paying attention. In everything I have become. And that's why, even when I have my worst challenges and adversities, I always go back to my dad, who fought, who stood for me, who stood by me. Because of the foundation that he had given me. So what have we done, or what are we doing as fathers to ensure that our daughters, our sons are coming to walk into that limelight, to even exceed us, so that we can make our world, make our society and our place a better place? And that's why I took upon myself. I'm so much captivated, motivated in his move to advocate for young men and women. So it's going to be a power pack of service. Again, is this Sunday is going to be on the 29th of June. The service starts at 2, but we admonish you to be there at 1:30 p.m. Hopefully, so we can start right on time. And for more information, the service is actually, the venue of this service is the Prayer Chapel, 7126 Yocum Street, Philadelphia, PA 191 142. I'm only a speaker, so I ask that I'll be used as a vessel by the Sovereign One to bring forth this word, His word. So I'm just that vessel that's going to be used. So come and don't be worried about who's going to be speaking on that day, but come and tap into the word of God. You know what I mean? We need fathers to assume their roles and responsibility, because it's actually about legacy. What are we going to be leaving behind? And that's the true measure. What are you going to leave behind? And I want to close with this, because I was speaking at a college, I believe it was a convocation. I was just visiting. And one thing he said, what do you wanted to be when he was just 13 years old? He already knew he wanted to be a preacher man who would advocate for social justice for all. He didn't want a mega church. And so he continued on that path. And he did that. And this man has traveled all over the world. But one thing he said that he had preached many sermons and eulogies. But the most difficult eulogies that he had to preach were eulogies where he had to make up the story for people who he had to do their eulogy, and would ask the question, what did they do when they were here on earth? There was no meaning to their lives. So what your role and responsibility is or are as fathers is more valuable, because you're not just here to produce the children, but to guide them, to protect them, to cultivate them, and to raise them in the way that they'll grow and will not depart. And this is what the Bible says. Raise the children, or raise a child in the way that he or she will grow and will not depart. So I want to conclude on that note. Again, come and celebrate with, Christ Chapel. I want to look at once more. And then as I conclude, it's Christ the King Prayer Chapel. And this is at the venue now. It's Christ the King Prayer Chapel, 7126 Yocum Street, Philadelphia, PA 19142. Just to get more information, you can call Pastor at the church, 267-541-4778. Again, tonight, this is your one and only moderator, Ayiti Williams. Thank you for joining the We Too movement, or the We Too Liberian movement podcast. Stay socially conscious. I want to say stay morally awake and stay empowered. Have a good night, and I look forward to seeing you guys here soon. Until then, have a pleasant night. God bless you. Bye.
Simple life, it's all we want to live. Give me food, give me clothes, give me love, and give me shelter. Simple.